Your trade deadline's already passed or it is coming up quickly, but nonetheless, the waiver wire is going to be the most important thing to be doing as we approach the fantasy football playoffs to make sure your team is in the best position it can be. Now, I'm going to break this down by running back, wide receiver, tight end, quarterback, and some defensive streamers, but I will be mixing in some waiver wire landmines and some traps in this video that you should avoid, even if I know a lot of people are going to run out to pick them up. Now, our first guy, not even going to be available in the majority of your leagues. Feel like we have to talk about him, though. A.J. Dillon, rostered in 62% of leagues. So, yeah, I'm sure if you're watching this video, you may not have an option of getting A.J. Dillon, but I know a lot of people will have him on their team. And let's talk about some realistic expectations because y'all know Aaron Jones went down in week 1. Aaron Jones goes down in week 1. I go out week 2. I'm like, okay, this matchup against Atlanta, let's fire up A.J. Dillon. And yeah, Dillon gave us 55 rushing yards and 8 receiving yards. Then week 3 rolls around. I'm like, oh, okay, we still have no Aaron Jones. Let's fire up A.J. Dillon. A.J. Dillon gives you 33 rushing yards, 0 receptions. A.J. Dillon this week with the Aaron Jones injury sees 14 carries, 29 rushing yards. And yeah, I just want to come out here and say, if you're playing in a deeper format, we can start A.J. Dillon this week. But ultimately, this is a spot where you're probably not excited about it. We saw what he looked like earlier this season with no Aaron Jones. He was a landmine if I've ever seen one. Now, what's going to happen is I'm going to go out there and I'm going to rank him as an RB3 this week. And then we are going to see A.J. Dillon go out there and have 20 carries, a rushing touchdown, and 4 receptions, right? But nonetheless, it is what it is. We have Matt LaFleur coming out saying that Aaron Jones' knee injury is not believed to be long-term. Looks like this may be like a 2 to 3 week injury based off what I've seen on Twitter. Now, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, of course, we have no idea. The injury looked really bad on the TV screen. I will say Dillon's someone that you have to roster. Hopefully on Thanksgiving, he goes out there and has a big game. That way you feel comfortable starting him in week 13. Now, going over to our next guy, I was surprised to see Zach Charbonnet only rostered in 44% of leagues. I don't know how many times I have to talk about this guy in waiver wire videos. I don't know how many times we have to label him as a buy low candidate. But now you have the Kenneth Walker injury. And exactly what we've been talking about over the past month is going to happen to Zach Charbonnet. This is a running back that has a proven track record of a receiving skill set. We saw it last year at UCLA. We saw it over the past month in Seattle, where Kenneth Walker would take the first and second down snaps, but Zach Charbonnet would get every single snap on third down and every single snap in the 2-minute drill. That is why against Washington, Zach Charbonnet had the most snaps in this backfield. Against Baltimore, Zach Charbonnet had the most snaps in this backfield. Against Cleveland, Zach Charbonnet had the most snaps in this backfield. We also combined that knowledge with the fact that Zach Charbonnet had that hidden handcuff appeal based off what you saw out of UCLA and said that previously he was already our top waiver wire pickup. We have him in buy low videos over the past weeks. I don't know how you don't already have this guy on your roster. Realistic expectations this next week, he is a bell cow back. If you look at the snaps played this week, you had 55 snaps for Zach Charbonnet, 7 snaps for DJ Dallas. Zach Charbonnet is going to be a 3-down running back that has a large role as a receiver. And I want to come out here and say, you know what? He's going to be an RB1. And in a good matchup, in a good offense, I think he would be. And I'd be comfortable ranking him there at like RB10. Now, this week, it does seem like it's going to be a little bit more of a tough spot where you're going up against the 49ers. Not only are you going up against the 49ers, who obviously have one of the best defenses in the NFL, but on top of that, ladies and gentlemen, Geno Smith may not play this game. So if you have no Geno Smith, we saw how bad Drew Lock looked. It's going to be a tough spot to go all in on Zach Charbonnet. Now, I will say, as of this recording, you have a 7-point spread on this Niners-Seahawks game. So maybe that does give you some confidence that Geno will play. As of now, we don't have that news. I'm going to be starting Zach Charbonnet no matter what, specifically in a full PPR format, where he's going to have the receiving down role. Now, going over to someone I just want to give an update for. I know a lot of people dropped Miles Sanders. Sanders rostered in 53% of leagues at this point. Maybe this is a running back they need to go out there and throw on the watch list. Just see if you wanted to pick him up at the bottom end of your roster. Because if you look at this graph from PFF, just consistently, Miles Sanders is now seeing more and more and more snaps where he is back to making this a 50-50 backfield split. At this trend, maybe Miles Sanders overtakes Chuba Hubbard. In reality, we're benching both these guys unless the other one goes down. Then you could see a feature down back roll. Now, our last running back we'll talk about here will be Royce Freeman. With Royce Freeman, you have 17 carries, 73 rushing yards. He leads this Los Angeles backfield, and I know a lot of people are going to go out there and pick him up. Royce Freeman is not going to be worth the roster spot going forward, ladies and gentlemen. I want to get that out there right now. While he was fine this week, this is a running back that's in a bad offense that has zero, and I repeat, zero chance of having any receiving usage, where you look at 50 carries so far over the past 4 weeks with 0 receptions. 0. Not to mention that Kyren Williams will be coming back. So Royce Freeman is a landmine. Do not pick up Royce Freeman. Just let him be, ladies and gentlemen. Now, our next position will be wide receiver. Going over to Jameson Williams, this is an option that we previously said, you know what, I really don't have much interest in. He is a field stretching option that maybe is good for the Detroit Lions offense, but from a fantasy perspective, he's really not going to have a ton of targets. And we know that these are the kind of wide receivers that you want on your NFL team, but you don't want on your fantasy team. Well, now this may be changing in that if you go ahead and look at the snaps that you had from Jameson Williams this week, the man did go out and play 40 snaps. This is in comparison to Josh Reynolds at 45. This is a comparison to Amon-Ra St. Brown at 56, which obviously is not great, right? I mean, you would want Jameson Williams running as many routes as Amon-Ra St. Brown. You would want him as an every down player if we were ever to consider to start him. But if you do look at this graph from PFF, it has been a clear trend upwards for Jameson Williams with this playing time, where this is essentially the most he's ever been involved in this Detroit Lions offense. At the same time he goes out, he has 44 receiving yards and the receiving touchdown. Only rostered in 20% of leagues at this point. So I think that Jameson Williams could be someone that you look to go ahead and pick up. And looking at wide receivers, ladies and gentlemen, for the Monday night game, if you're interested in an underdog pick'em, I actually do like Devonta Smith for more receptions than Rashee Rice. Now, Rashee Rice will have an added half a reception on his total there. But still, I think that Smith has a good shot to get a considerable amount of volume, considering the fact that you have no Dallas Goedert in this offense. And of course, if you want to tail me on that underdog pick'em, or if you want to get the Patrick Mahomes special pick'em more than less than half a total yard for tonight's game, you can find that link to underdog in the description, comment section. Promo code FLOCK, 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings. Now, going over to our next guy, Romeo Doubs is a wide receiver that I think a lot of people are going to be looking at as well. Romeo Doubs coming off back-to-back weeks now with the receiving touchdown. Romeo Doubs somewhat cements himself as the lead wide receiver for the Green Bay Packers here with the 53 receiving yards. Now, while Romeo Doubs rostered in 54% of leagues, and if you have him already, I'm fine if you wanted to roster him. I would say I'm not going to be like running out there and thinking that Romeo Doubs some great pickup with a ton of upside, because the reality of the situation with Romeo Doubs is he's not in a good offense. We have seen him over a large sample now. We kind of know who he is. And most concerningly, with the Green Bay Packers here, they have the same identity as the Kansas City Chiefs when it comes to their skill positional guys, in that they don't have a real pecking order. It's, okay, we are going to throw the ball to 15 different players this week. Everybody's going to get 3 to 4 targets. And sometimes if you're in a Kansas City Chiefs offense with Patrick Mahomes, you can thrive in that role, right? I mean, you can go out there and say, yeah, I'll take a 15% team target share. I'll take a 20% team target share. I'll run with it, and I'll be great in fantasy. Well, the issue is, while you can do that in Kansas City, you can't do that in Green Bay. So Romeo Doubs, you can pick him up. Not super excited about it. And someone we labeled as a landmine wide receiver 2 weeks ago, Odell Beckham Jr. is now a player that I think you can roster. If you are looking at Odell, rostered in 29% of leagues, my hesitation in rostering him previously was like, okay, well, yeah, he's coming out getting you some receiving touchdowns. That's exciting. The underlying volume's not really consistently there. It's hard to project that volume to be there in the long term. But now that's a little bit different. He's coming off a week where he had 116 receiving yards off of 7 targets. This is in a game where he also gets injured. He doesn't play the entire time. So if he were to be out there the entire game, you'd assume that possibly he would have actually come closer to 10-ish targets. And most importantly, with the injury that we have to Mark Andrews, this now makes it where Odell Beckham Jr. is a wide receiver that can get an extra target or 2 a game. So while Odell was not someone that I wanted rostered previously, at this point, I think that you could go out there and pick him up. I mean, he kind of falls in the same range as Romeo Doubs. Obviously, Romeo Doubs, at this point, you could say he has a higher floor because we've seen Doubs over a larger sample. But I think you could say Odell Beckham Jr. has the higher ceiling based off just the talent we've seen him have before, plus the condensed targetry in Baltimore in comparison to Green Bay. Now, one guy that I want to point out that I feel like is going to be dropped a considerable amount this week, Pat Freiermuth is someone that everybody's having to take off the IR, right? If Freiermuth was on the IR for quite some time, I mean, the last time we saw him before this week was October 1st against Houston. And yeah, now you get him back in, so people are having to make a waiver wire move with them. And I understand a lot of people are going to run out there and cut Pat Freiermuth. If you wanted to do it, you really can. Sure, go for it. I would say in a 12-team league, I would wait one more week. If I'm looking at Freiermuth, this is a tight end that, yes, horrible this week. 1 reception, 7 receiving yards. And outside of that, he goes through and plays 31 snaps out of 58. He runs 14 routes out of 33. Freiermuth, horrendous. But to be fair to him, it was a very tough matchup against Cleveland. And if you look at the matchups that Freiermuth has played in so far this season, you've had the Niners, the Browns again, and the Raiders. The games that he has stayed healthy in. Keep in mind, it's injured in the Texans game. You throw that out the window. So while he's disappointed against the Browns and the Niners defense, and he has done absolutely nothing, the one game against a reasonable matchup with the Raiders, he was okay. He had 41 receiving yards and the receiving touchdown. I don't want to come out here and act like Pat Freiermuth is a great pickup. I don't want to act like Pat Freiermuth is someone that has top 5 ceiling at the tight end position. You would clearly rather have a player like Trey McBride. It's not even remotely close. But I would just say, if you rostered him this long, might as well give him another week. Let him get up to 100%. And hopefully get to see him in a matchup that's a little bit better than what we have with the Browns. Now, going over to what we have with Isaiah Likely, I know Likely is going to be a tight end that a lot of people look to pick up as well. We kind of saw the Isaiah Likely experiment week 1 when everybody played him with no Mark Andrews. He got you 1 target for 4 receiving yards. I mean, Isaiah Likely's never really shown the same type of upside that you have with a player like Freiermuth. So I would rather go with Freiermuth over Likely this week, if I'm going to be honest with you. I'd probably just go ahead and leave Likely on the waiver wire. Now, in terms of going out there and looking at some potential DST streamers, I mean, obviously, you have some teams that you just want to be starting every single week. If you have the Niners, you don't care about a streamer. If you have the Cowboys, you don't care about the streamers, yada, 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 yada. However, if you are looking at the Minnesota Vikings, Chicago Bears, Vikings favored by 3.5 points here in Minnesota. I think that you could go through and stream the Minnesota defense against Chicago. Another defensive streamer that you could possibly go with is if you wanted to look at the Arizona Cardinals, depending on the health of Cooper Kupp, depending on the health of Matthew Stafford, depending on the health of Kyren Williams. There's a lot up in the air right now in Los Angeles. I would just continue to monitor that situation and see what we have. And then you could also look at the Tennessee Titans defense as a potential streamer going up against the Carolina Panthers, where obviously the Panthers have been a bottom 3 offense in the NFL so far this season. Now, I think that's all I have for y'all in this video, ladies and gentlemen. I want to reiterate, obviously, you're picking up A.J. Dillon. Just don't get super excited to start him immediately. Obviously, Zach Charbonnet is someone that is the #1 waiver wire priority this week. I'm starting him immediately in a full BBR format, assuming that Kenneth Walker misses any time. Sanders, probably worth the Ross spot. Royce Freeman, not worth it. Please leave him on the IR. Jameson, maybe worth the roster spot. Romeo Dobbs, maybe worth the roster spot. Odell, maybe worth the roster spot. Frymuth, maybe worth the roster spot. And then just go ahead, keep Isaiah Likely on waivers, ladies and gentlemen. Just prioritize the running backs if you can. But thank you again. I really do appreciate you. Really hope that you're able to get something from this video. And as always, I hope I get to see you in the live stream later tonight. Thank you so much for everything. And if you wanted to tell me on that Devonta Smith, more receptions than Rashee Rice pick'em, you can find that on Underdog Fantasy. Link in the live chat description comment section. Promo code FLOCK, 100% deposit match, plus our rest of season fantasy football rankings and tiers, and that Patrick Mahomes special pick'em more than less than half a total yard.